For Sei V2, there's fundamentally three things that we're doing. The first is we're adding in EVM support. So this is going to be an interoperable EVM, which will be able to communicate with the rest of the chain as it exists right now. The second thing that we're doing is we're going to be supporting optimistic parallelization. So what this means is that the chain will be able to figure out how to parallelize transactions. Developers don't need to do anything. So developers can just take something from Ethereum L1, deploy that onto Sei, and it will just work. So it's a massive unlock for developers from the backwards compatibility standpoint. And the third thing is that we're also going to be improving the way that state access, state commitment, and state storage works with what we're calling SeiDB.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Edge Podcast. I'm DeFi Dad here with Nomadic from 4RC. Today's show spotlights the world's fastest Layer 1 blockchain, Sei. Recently, at the end of November, Sei announced the upcoming release of Sei V2, the first parallelized EVM blockchain. In this episode, we'll cover all you need to know about Sei V2, including how it works, its backwards compatibility, its optimistic parallelization, and how the interoperability of the chain leads to a more seamless developer experience. But before we do, just a quick word from our sponsors who make the Edge Podcast possible.
Introducing the MANTLE liquid staking protocol, MANTLE LSP, a permissionless, non-custodial ETH liquid staking protocol deployed on Ethereum L1 and governed by MANTLE. With MANTLE LSP, users can stake ETH to instantly receive METH, earn yield and accumulate rewards the longer you stake. METH is the value accumulating receipt token that will give you access to expanded yield opportunities. Stake and watch your yield grow with MANTLE LSP.
For most of us, our crypto journey started with MetaMask. And now with MetaMask Portfolio, we can do so much more. MetaMask Portfolio puts you in control. Use the dashboard to see all your assets and balances across your wallets in one place. The buy feature allows us to buy crypto assets effortlessly with fiat options such as PayPal or credit card. The swap feature allows us to swap any tokens anytime by finding a selection of available rates. The bridge feature allows us to bridge between networks including Ethereum, L1s, and L2s based on the best price and fastest delivery time. And with the stake feature, anyone in a few clicks can stake ETH and earn rewards. Do more in Web3 your way with a safe, simple, and convenient tool that's all in one place. Track and manage your Web3 everything at metamask.io/portfolio. Mike, before we get back to the show, can you explain what is liquid restaking?
Everybody at this point is familiar with liquid staking. It lets you take your staked ETH, mint a liquid staking token, and then use that token in DeFi. Well, the hottest thing in staking right now is restaking. It's the ability to reuse your staked ETH to provide Ethereum's trust layer to other services that want to benefit from it. Services like data availability layers, Oracle networks, other blockchains, and beyond. The benefit of restaking is that you get to earn additional staking rewards on top of your normal staking rewards. Well, currently, if you want to restake your ETH, your only option is to lock up your ETH. The reason that's a problem is because you can't use your restaked ETH in DeFi. We are launching ETH, the ETHER.FI liquid restaking token, because with liquid restaking, users get the benefit of staking rewards, restaking rewards, and they get to collect loyalty points for ETHER.FI and EigenLayer through this token. So it's the easiest way to get exposure to two up-and-coming early protocols, and on top of that, get all the benefits of staking and restaking.
To learn more about ETH liquid staking and liquid restaking, go to ETHER.FI.
It all started so simply with CryptoKitties and Maker on Ethereum, but quickly became complex with more applications and many chains. Today, everyone agrees UX issues are the biggest blocker standing in the way of crypto adoption. Introducing AVOCADO. Multi-chain UX redesigned from the ground up. The first wallet to abstract networks, accounts, and gas. One gas tank to pay transaction fees on all chains in USDC. And native access to INSTADAPP's powerful, custom DeFi strategies. AVOCADO, one wallet to rule all chains.
All right, let's introduce Jay Jog, the co-founder of Sei Labs. Jay, welcome to the Edge podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Jay, thanks for joining us. And, before we jump into all things Sei V2, I'd love to kick off with this epic story I've heard about your time at Robinhood, which coincided with the run-up of GameStop. So maybe we can kick off with that and just a little bit more background about the start of your career in crypto and what led you to found Sei.
Of course. Yeah, so my background is I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I was surrounded by tech my entire life. Went to college to study computer science. And I initially got into crypto back in 2017. So at that time, my roommate, he was going through Binance Labs. And we ended up tinkering on a couple of different projects together. I got exposed to smart contract development for the first time. And after that, I ended up joining Robinhood. So actually, when I interviewed at Robinhood, it was just basically two houses that are across the street from each other in Palo Alto. So literally, like in one of the houses, they had taken the bedrooms in that house, and that's where the engineering teams would work from. So they would have like separate teams with their own standing desks in those bedrooms. So it was definitely a very small company back then. And then afterwards, I joined. I saw the company 10x, and I was an engineering lead when the entire GameStop saga happened back. I guess at the time of this recording, it was almost exactly 3 years ago. It was like second half of January 2021. So for any listeners that might not remember, what was happening back then is there are a bunch of degens from subreddits like Wall Street Bets that were all buying into roughly a dozen meme stocks. So these stocks included GameStop, AMC, and I think there were like around 10, 15 other stocks. And it wasn't really fundamentals driven. It was very much just like people were excited about some stocks. They just like the stock, and they kind of bought into it. And this led to like massive upwards price action, right? So Wall Street, sophisticated traders were looking at this. They were like, this is stupid. So they decided to start shorting it. And shorting is when you bet against the stock. And the way that shorting works in practice is you borrow a stock, you sell it, and then afterwards you have to buy it back to return the stock. So when the stock price started to go up a lot of these traders, hedge funds, they were losing money. So then they wanted to close their short position. And the way you close it is you have to buy back the stock. So when you buy it back, that leads to even more upwards price action. So there's this concept of a short squeeze, which is essentially what was happening, where people were losing their money shorting the stock. So then they needed to buy more of it, which led to even greater price action, which led to more shorts being squeezed. So yeah, I mean, retail was winning, Wall Street was losing, and it was just like this very true Robinhood style moment. And then one day, I believe it was January 28th, so just one day out of the blue, Robinhood decided to turn off buys. So it was not communicated well at all. Like Robinhood didn't give clear justifications for why this was happening, and the community at large was just like outraged. Like beyond just like the kind of ethos of like Robinhood is supposed to be supporting the little guy, and Robinhood was no longer doing that. People also lost a lot of money because a lot of the upwards price action kind of was happening through Robinhood, and then it was being hampered because Robinhood stopped letting people buy. So, I mean, the entire world was outraged. As an insider, I had no idea what was happening behind the scenes either, because they would tell the news publicly and announce it to us at the exact same time. So as an insider, I had like no better idea of what was happening. And as a lead, like people on my team are coming to me with questions, and I don't really have anything to be telling them. So that was a super like shitty experience. Like it just makes you feel completely powerless when you go through something like that. Like you have absolutely no agency. And after going through that experience, my co-founder and I, we decided that we wanted to start building something like Robinhood, except building it in a trustless and decentralized way. And that was the original inspiration for Sei. So initially we wanted to build a DEX. Ultimately, we decided that building the general purpose infrastructure to support DEXs is a more pressing problem. So that's what we ended up deciding to do later on.
Can you talk about some of the shortcomings that were there, that wouldn't allow you to build the DEX you wanted to? And I'm sure that'll kind of lead more into some of the TLDR, the specs around Sei that are, so optimized for building that DEX now.
Yeah, so it was second half of 2021. We were looking into all the infrastructure we could use to build an exchange. And specifically, we wanted to build a highly liquid, capital efficient exchange. So we were looking at an order book based design. And trying to build an order book on chain. Like if you're trying to do that on Ethereum L1, it's just fundamentally not possible because like Ethereum L1 supports like 10 to 20 transactions per second right now. And if you want an order book style exchange, you need to have a lot more activity happening. So it's just not feasible to do that on L1. Even on rollups, it's not really feasible because rollups are still bandwidth constrained at the base level. So they can't really get more than, in practice, like 30, 40 TPS. They're actually supported on every single rollup. So building it as a rollup wasn't really a feasible option either. We then considered other types of infrastructure. Back in 2021, Solana, I think, was the most obvious choice, but there were definitely a ton of limitations with Solana at the time. It had a ton of outages happening back then, consistent liveness issues. And even beyond that, it didn't really have the EVM support. So things like MetaMask weren't usable. So it became quite difficult to onboard users into that ecosystem as well relative to like building on Ethereum L1. So after seeing kind of all of those considerations, we decided that building an order book based exchange on chain just wasn't really doable at the time. So we decided to build our own L1 to solve that specific problem. And that's exactly what Sei is. Sei is the fastest L1 in existence right now. So we started building it March of 2022. And then since then, it went live on mainnet in August of 2023. So around 5 months before the time of this recording. And things overall have been going quite well. From a technical standpoint, Sei V1 is seeing a sustained 390 millisecond time to finality. So it's the fastest chain out there, a magnitude faster even than chains like Solana. Like in Solana's case, you might have 600 millisecond block times, but then blocks don't get finalized until there's like multiple blocks being added. So in Solana's case, it might be like 3 to 5 second actual finality. So yeah, I mean, in Sei's case, it's the fastest chain out there. The biggest feedback that we've gotten from developers though, is they want to have EVM support because all crypto native or almost all crypto native developers right now, they're EVM developers. So they have spent their entire crypto career building with the Ethereum virtual machine, and they understand all the quirks of how the EVM works. So they're able to write very secure, relatively performant code using the EVM. And trying to get them to switch over to a new execution environment is a massive ask because even putting aside the Ethereum alignment side of things, it's a massive security risk for them. Like if they make even a tiny like error in writing a new smart contract that goes unnoticed by auditors, then their entire project can get drained. Like the startup they're starting can just completely get wiped out from one small bug. So they tend to be very hesitant to go to new execution environments. So that's why we put out the Sei V2 announcement, the proposal at the end of November. And Sei V2 is the first parallelized EVM. So it allows us to get the best of both Ethereum and Solana with I guess from the Ethereum side, you get the Ethereum virtual machine. So you're able to get all the mind share, all the tooling, all the developer community that's already there with the EVM. And you're able to scale that and get the type of high performance execution layer that you see with Solana.
Jay, let's just go over that timeline a bit more because just like looking at it from my vantage point, a lot of stuff has happened really fast on your side. You did mainnet August 2023, and then the Sei V2 blog post came out end of November, like you mentioned. So you launch a mainnet blockchain and basically call for this pretty massive upgrade shortly thereafter. It seems like you're iterating very quickly and kind of taking in all that feedback and just try to get things to market fast. I think we should maybe key in a bit more on what Sei V2 is, maybe like what a parallelized VM is and what that means. And then, maybe we can dive into a few other component parts of what Sei V2 is bringing to the table as well.
So I guess to your first point around like how fast Sei is iterating, I do think Sei Labs has a very strong focus on moving quickly. Just like growing up in Silicon Valley, I think you notice that that's the strongest differentiator between teams that do very well and teams that kind of just aren't really able to find much traction. In the case of Sei V2, though, a lot of the components we'd already been working on even before the mainnet launch. For example, adding in EVM support, it's something that we knew was necessary for the growth of the ecosystem. And we'd actually put out like the initial pull request for that in August of 2022. So a lot of the work had already been done even before mainnet, but it became very clear that we needed to put out a proposal and push the community to make the update as soon as possible. In terms of, so I'll go over parallelization first, and then I can talk more about Sei V2. So if you look at every EVM-based chain out there right now, they're all single-threaded. What this means is that if you have 100 transactions that need to be processed in a block, they'll all get processed one after the other. This is really simple to do from like a software engineering standpoint. Like you have the 100 transactions, you run one, you don't do anything with the other ones, and you run the second one, etc. So it's really simple from like a software engineering standpoint, but it does not leverage modern hardware. So I mean, modern hardware, like the laptops that people are going to listen to this on, the phones that they're listening to it on, modern hardware has multiple cores, and modern hardware is able to process multiple work streams simultaneously. So it's kind of silly to take this modern hardware that is capable of like processing multiple work streams and then having it run these transactions in a single-threaded way. And that's the core value proposition that parallelization offers. It lets you run multiple transactions at the same time to be able to get better performance. So from the user standpoint, what ends up happening, so I guess from a technological standpoint, what ends up happening is you're able to support more transactions per second. So instead of being able to support, let's say, 20 transactions per second, you can now support, let's say, 20,000 transactions per second. So once you have this increase in the number of transactions you're able to support, there's two unlocks that happen. The first, from the user standpoint, is transaction fees go down. Previously, if you wanted to get something included and there's only like 10 to 20 transactions that can be supported per second, you need to pay a lot of money to get your transaction included because there's going to be a lot of, like that block space is really valuable. But if you're now able to have 20,000 transactions per second, it becomes much cheaper from the user standpoint. So it just makes it much more accessible. Like I was in India a couple of weeks ago and asking someone to pay like $50 or $100 to be transacting on Ethereum L1, like that's kind of a non-starter. Most like 99% of people in India would not ever consider doing something like that. But if you're able to bring it down to be a penny or less than a penny, then it becomes much more accessible. So I think that's a massive unlock with supporting greater throughput. The second thing is you're able to support a bigger design space for developers. Like if you want to build on the Ethereum virtual machine right now with a single-threaded EVM implementation, if you look at Ethereum L1, if you look at all the rollups, you're not really getting more than like 30 to 50 TPS. So there's only certain types of applications you can build if you're constrained to only having like 30 TPS. For example, you're not able to build an order book-based exchange, and that's why you've seen the rise of automated market makers. So like AMM style exchanges on chain. And that's not because AMMs are better. There's the reason AMMs haven't taken off in traditional finance. The reason that AMMs are there on chain is because they fit the limitations of what the EVM currently has. So because of that, like if you're able to offer a bigger design space for developers are able to come up with more creative types of applications that require higher throughput, which then lead to more stuff that people can end up doing on chain. So it ends up being a win-win from that standpoint. So yeah, I mean, if you are able to support parallelization, there's multiple things that need to go into that. But if you are able to support it, it could be a big win for the user experience. So I'll just briefly go over how we are supporting everything for Sei V2. For Sei V2, there's fundamentally three things that we're doing. The first is we're adding in EVM support. So this is going to be an interoperable EVM, which will be able to communicate with the rest of the chain as it exists right now. The second thing that we're doing is we're going to be supporting optimistic parallelization. So what this means is that the chain will be able to figure out how to parallelize transactions. Developers don't need to do anything. So developers can just take something from Ethereum L1, deploy that onto Sei, and it will just work. So it's a massive unlock for developers from the backwards compatibility standpoint. And the third thing is that we're also going to be improving the way that state access, state commitment, and state storage works. with what we're calling SeiDB. So all of these combined make up the Sei V2 proposal, and this will help us get up to around 5 to 10,000 transactions that can be processed every second.
So Jay, with everything you just framed up, which I think you gave some really meaningful reasons for why Sei is able to differentiate or how it differentiates from Ethereum and L2s. But I know it is still somewhat of a challenge to pitch developers to like move from one ecosystem to another. So yeah, just curious what you can share about like why should a developer consider moving over to Sei? What other sort of like selling points can you offer them?
Yeah, so our goal with Sei V2 is to scale the Ethereum virtual machine. And if you look at the two different ways that you can do that, the first is through the rollup centric Ethereum roadmap. And if you're able to have a bunch of different rollups, then what you are able to do is you're able to give people dedicated block space. So every single application can have their own rollup if they want to. They're not going to be having congestion issues with like trying to fight for block space. It also makes it much easier to iterate, because if you only need to focus on the execution layer, then you don't need to worry about anything else. The downside there, what that doesn't really solve, is this issue with offering greater throughput. Because with Ethereum L1, Ethereum L2s, you're not able to scale the number of transactions that can be processed every second. And that severely restricts the design space that you're able to get. So the biggest selling point for developers to build on Sei V2 instead of building on the existing Ethereum ecosystem is this design space that having greater throughput unlocks. And the two big selling points there tend to be tied to, as I was mentioning before, cheaper user fees. So if users pay less money, it makes it much more accessible, which is like fantastic. And the design space ends up leading to different types of applications you can support. Three that I'll mention right now are, first of all, an order book based exchange is something you can build on Sei, which you cannot build in the current Ethereum ecosystem. The second is you can build games where you have, like right now, a lot of games, they just have like token transfers happening on chain, and then most activity ends up actually occurring off chain. With this, you can have much more of the activity happening on chain. So like every step that a user takes or every action that they perform can go on chain. They're able to have much better verifiability. This unlocks a new type of design space depending on what your type of game is. Another example would be something like a social media site that wants to be built on Sei. Instead of only having, like, once again, like small components that are being built on chain, you can start moving towards everything being written on chain. So like, let's say someone performs an action like liking something or like tweeting something, like everything can start being moved on chain. So I think the design space is really what draws developers. Outside of that, for more of like the support that the foundation offers, I think the biggest thing would be the ecosystem fund. So this was announced around a year ago. There's a $120 million ecosystem and liquidity fund that's like there to help grow anything that is building on Sei. So from both the fundraising standpoint and also the on-chain liquidity standpoint.
Jay, I have a question just about when Sei V2 will be live. Have you kind of like picked out a date, or is that still kind of TBD?
Yeah, so there's no specific dates for that, but the order of operations that need to happen is that first we need it to be code complete. Then we needed to launch the internal DevNet where external teams can deploy to. Then we need to start the audits, then public testnet, and then mainnet. In terms of where we are right now, we are functionally code complete. So like the core functionality is all there. Right now there's just like small fixes and stuff that is going in. The internal DevNet was deployed back in December, so around a month ago now. And we've already had several teams, external teams, that were able to like go through the end-to-end flow of deploying on Sei. I mean, in their case, it was really nice because there's full EVM bytecode compatibility. So they were able to seamlessly deploy it. All the tooling worked as well. To like whatever developer tooling they wanted to use. The user tooling such as MetaMask as well. Like everything just worked. So that's all been going great. We started the audits. I think I tweeted about that a couple of weeks ago. So that's also currently a work in progress. Next step will be the public testnet, which has been announced as being sometime in Q1 of this year. So sometime probably in the next few months. And then the last step would be to go through a governance proposal. And assuming the community accepts that, probably sometime in H1 of this year, there'll be the mainnet upgrade that happens.
Hey, Jay, there are a number of larger words that you've used. And if folks go to this blog post from the end of November that outlines Sei V2, I think they'll find a lot of like helpful context. But if we were going to like dumb this down even further, can we almost do like a rapid fire of some of these terms? I've been just jotting down a few of them that I think are really key to understanding Sei V2, and just whatever you can do to strip it down in like 10, 15 seconds, and we'll just move to the next term and so
I like
on.
that.
So
yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so the first one then would be backwards compatibility. How do you dumb that down?
You can take something from Ethereum L1 and deploy it to Sei with no code changes. So if you look at other like EVM ecosystems, sometimes you need to make code changes to deploy, which makes it much harder to take existing functionality over. In Sei's case, it's the simplest possible way to do it, which leads to the best developer experience.
Super helpful. Okay, next one is optimistic parallelization.
So we're able to make the chain faster. Specifically, this will lead to the two things that I mentioned before. The first is cheaper transaction fees for users. And secondly, greater transactions per second that can be supported. So a bigger design space for developers.
How about SeiDB? You touched on this for a moment, and maybe if you can add a little context as to like, is that like replacing other options, or is it providing a better building block for folks that are a little less familiar with this?
Yeah, so I'll spend maybe a minute or two touching on this point. The biggest issue with having a chain that has more transactions per second is that it leads to more state that is created. So state would be account balances, like I have 10 Sei, and it'll be smart contract data. So there's this Uniswap smart contract. These are the different pools that are there. This is the information for each pool. When you have more activity happening, that leads to more state that is generated. You then need to figure out how do you, like there's several different problems that come up. One is like, how do you have efficient state access? Like when you're processing transactions, how do you ensure that you're able to not have degraded experience from just having more data that needs to be processed? And then secondly, like how do you actually run a full node so that you're able to run, like spin it up quickly, and then you don't run into issues with like storing all of the data tied to that. I think there's like a lot more depth to this, but I'll try to keep it a little higher level. So like how do you solve these problems? And that's exactly what we're doing with SeiDB. So we've created a pretty, I would say, complicated and thoughtful set of things to help with both improving performance and also reducing complexity around storing data and spinning up new nodes.
And then lastly, let's just talk about the benefits of interoperability with Sei V2. There's quite a story to tell there. Anything more you can share to dumb that down?
Yeah, so currently with Sei V1, there are COS and WASM smart contracts. There's been a ton of activity that's happened on Sei V1 in the past few months. Like there's been a ton of NFTs, inscriptions, there's been tokens that have been traded as well. With Sei V2, we don't want all that functionality to be lost. So the way this works with Sei V2 is we're adding in EVM support, and everything that is being built on EVM will be able to interact with everything that exists for COS and WASM right now. So EVM can call COS and WASM can call EVM. It just creates this cohesive ecosystem where you don't really lose any of the functionality from before.
Jay, I want to shift gears here a little bit. And something that constantly comes up when we interview new chains or dApps or new ecosystems in general is just this conversation around like what is kind of like the most important thing? Is it having the best tech? Is it being the most product focused? Or is the best tech kind of lead into the best products? I'm kind of curious how you think about that, because we see people and talk to people that we can just tell they're hyper focused on the tech and like what's underneath. And then we talk to people that are like almost optimizing for products and users, and they'll just kind of pick the best tech off the shelf in this like modular future. So yeah, just kind of curious like how you're thinking about this.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Bay Area. My co-founder also grew up in Silicon Valley. Our founding team, we all started off in San Francisco. And there's a very clear Silicon Valley approach to building startups. When you're building startups, you want to be solving a user problem, and every single thing that you do should be somehow tying back into solving that user problem. In this case, we think that there's a lot of friction with the current EVM, and we want to be improving and scaling that EVM. That is the core user problem that we want to be solving. In terms of how we think about what to be building, we don't want to be over optimizing anything. Like, we don't want to be prematurely optimizing anything. The reason for that is that as an early stage company, time is the most precious resource you have. Like, once you've raised money, then it's no longer money. It's like, how do you make the best use of the time that you have, that your team has, to be able to build a product and get basically solve these user problems as quickly as you can. So we strongly stay away from trying to prematurely optimize anything. And this results in a lot of design decisions that we make. So I definitely would not say that we're like not innovating at all on technical side. Like, there's a ton of innovation that we're doing on like parallelization, on state access, state commitment, state storage, like that I was talking about before. But in terms of our core decision making, it's how do we improve the user experience first? Because at the end of the day, everything that we're building is open sourced. Like, there's a lot of other projects that try to keep things closed source. I would say some pretty major blockchains are taking that approach right now. In our case, everything is open source. So we don't think that the technology is going to be a differentiator. Like, anything that we build will be copied by other people. People are actually already copying some of the stuff we're doing with Sei. What ends up being the differentiator in the longer term is the community, like the friends you make along the way, in a way. It really does end up being the community that results in the original ecosystem winning, and anyone that tries to just blindly fork it not being able to win. Like, if I were to try and fork Ethereum L1 right now, just like taking the code base that they have and trying to build a new Ethereum, I will not succeed because the community is already there on L1. So I think you need to solve user problems to grow a community, and that should be the primary focus, not like building the best tech for the sake of building the best tech.
Yeah, well said. You have the understanding of, I think, any OG in the crypto space. It takes folks many years to like learn this lesson. But I also think it sometimes gets wrongly wielded as an excuse to not be trying new things, building new things, in the case of whether it's like a blockchain or even new protocols. So kind of going off of what you were saying, like building its own community, a unique sort of like user culture. What sort of activity are you seeing on Sei? Like, what are some of the most interesting dApps? And these don't have to be live too. Maybe you can allude to some stuff that we should be, some of the teams that we should be following or be excited to learn about.
Yeah. So the past 3 months have been insane in terms of activity on mainnet. So I guess just as for the listeners, the stuff that's currently happening on Sei. So initially we started seeing a surge in inscription activity on Sei. This was around the December timeframe, similar to when it was happening on every other chain. Except in many other chains' cases, it resulted in them having like liveness issues, like an outage, some kind of downtime. In Sei's case, we were actually able to handle inscriptions exceptionally well. We're seeing over 200 TPS of activity that was happening, and there wasn't really any issues with the core chain. So I think that led to a lot of, what's the word for it? People started trusting Sei more in terms of the technology. And that led to a lot of new activity that we started seeing. This new activity was tied largely to NFTs. So now I think at this point, there's like a new NFT collection that's launching on Sei literally every single day, like even on the weekends. And it's actually pretty crazy how much like Sei is starting to very quickly become a new home for NFTs. So that's one of the things that has been happening. There have also started to be a lot more projects that are launching tokens, and now there's a lot of trading activity that's happened. In the past, I think 30 days, we've hit almost 200 million of trading volume, like on-chain trading volume on Sei. There's like flip side dashboards that show that activity happening. And yeah, it's like just crazy how much things are starting to pick up. I think a lot of this was also kickstarted because we started to have like this entire Seiyan narrative, the Seiyan kind of community that started to get built. So, I mean, for a little bit of context over here, the word Sei sounds similar to Seiyan, and like Sei Labs, Sei Foundation did not ever think of this like, oh shit, Sei and Seiyan are pretty similar. There should be like the Seiyan kind of narrative that spreads. But I think in December, like a lot of really big name people, they started kind of memeing about that. I think Ansem was the first one. And then Hasaka was also started memeing about that. And then there was just a ton of community like excitement around the Seiyan meme. And then Sei Foundation, they had like a vote on Twitter around what like should be the name of Sei community members, whether it should be sailors or Saiyans. And like Saiyans won by a landslide. And ever since then, it's just been like, yeah, the Seiyan meme has started to take off. And it is fantastic. Like this is all organic, community-driven stuff that's happening. Like Sei Labs, Sei Foundation is completely uninvolved with this. And I mean, there's been a ton of other just completely organic stuff happening as well. There's like the Sei show that has recently started, which is like a community member was like, oh shit, the Sei ecosystem is taking off. I want to be building like the first show, like the first kind of podcast style thing for the Sei ecosystem. And like now that's like something that has a daily episode. So a ton of like just organic community driven things. In terms of projects that I'm excited about, for Sei V2, there's going to be a ton of big name projects that are going to be announced soon. Like these are OG Ethereum projects that are coming on to Sei. So I think that's like, it's going to be just super fun to announce that. In terms of stuff that's there right now, one project that went live, I think a few days ago, was called Silo. That's like LSTs on Sei. I think that's cool. Outside of that, like some of the applications that are seeing a ton of engagement right now are, one would be Palette, which is the core NFT marketplace. And Palette was actually a really interesting story because they started seeing a surge in activity. Like they were running into scaling issues in December, and then they had to add in that queue. I don't know if you guys remember, but there was like this queue to access Palette. It was like 8,000 people are like waiting in line to access this queue. And that was definitely not intentional. I think they literally just ran into scaling issues, but it became like a really interesting kind of marketing approach where that led to more excitement around the Sei community because it's like, oh man, there's so many people that are trying to access these NFTs or like this NFT marketplace. So that was wild. And then Astroport right now is continuing to have the most on-chain trading activity happening.
Man, there was so much in there. And just for clarity, when we say Seiyan, that's like a Dragon Ball Z reference.
Yes. So for any listener that doesn't know, there's like this race, like this alien race called the Saiyans. And that's like what Goku and everyone else in Dragon Ball Z is like all the main characters. So it's very much a Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z meme. And yeah, there's just a ton of content around that. So I think people have been very enthusiastic about it.
This is the part of the podcast. Like if any of my family members or friends make it this far, they think I'm even more nerdy than they thought I was before. But
welcome to crypto, man.
Exactly. Jay, I want to touch on the Sei token as well before we wrap here. Maybe you can just kind of quickly highlight, what utility it serves in the ecosystem, why people should hold it. Kind of just generally what the Sei token does.
Yeah, so Sei is a layer 1 blockchain, and the Sei token fills a role similar to that of the ETH token on Ethereum or the Sol token on Solana. I would say that there's 3 primary use cases over here. The first is to help secure the network. So it's a proof of stake network, so you can stake this token with validators. And if validators misbehave, then the stake can be slashed. So it's first of all used to help secure the network. The second thing is for governance. So to be able to vote on any proposals that come in. And the third is for transaction fees to be able to do anything on the network. So in terms of that, it's like a pretty straightforward a one token. I think that one thing that's interesting about the Sei ecosystem though is when you have more stuff that can happen in the ecosystem, that leads to more opportunities for MEV, which is maxable extractable value. And it's basically the value that you can get by like reordering transactions within a block. What I see happening on Sei in the future is once there starts to be more activity happening, there'll be more avenues for people to collect MEV. And there'll be primitives built into the chain to support redistribution of this MEV. So instead of it going to validators, it'll instead get redistributed to people that are staking the Sei token and helping secure the network. And I think that becomes a really exciting way to drive value back to people that are helping secure the network.
Guys, this is probably a good place for us to wrap up. So I want to remind our listeners that they should first learn about the Sei network by going to sei.fi. sei.io. They can also then follow two different accounts on Twitter. One is Sei_Labs. The other one is Sei Network. And then lastly, you're going to want to follow Jay at his full name, Jay Pendra. Is that it?
Jay Indra, yeah.
And then Jay, just thanks so much for taking the time to walk us through like all the exciting innovations you guys are working on. I know it's, again, still really early, but I'm excited to learn about the Silo, LST, and any other like future projects like Astroport that are seemingly growing really rapidly on Sei. But would you like to give us any sort of final word on, anything else to look forward to in the next 12 months? I know V2 is probably the top of that list, but anything else you can share would be grateful to know.
V2 is going to be massive, I think, both for the Sei ecosystem and also just for the Ethereum ecosystem more broadly. I think it's going to be one of the biggest step function improvements on the EVM that has, honestly ever been created. So yeah, it should really unlock a lot of use cases for people to play around with.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're a talented founder or developer, please consider reaching out to our team at fourthrevolution.capital. And for future episodes of the Edge podcast, please check out our link tree at edge_pod.